Greece's debt crisis is spiraling out of control, and it looks like the situation might just have a domino effect in Europe. So who's next, and what does this mean for the rest of the world? Well, joining me to help discuss this is an investigative journalist, Webster Tarpley. Webster, thanks so much for joining me. So first of all, it seems like a lot of European markets are panicking right now, and this has already affected countries like Spain, Portugal, and Ireland. Are we likely going to see a ripple effect here?
Well, there is a ripple effect. You're in essentially the second wave of the world economic depression that began with the U.S. banking crisis of September, October of 2008. I would stress this is much less a matter of economic fundamentals than it is the commitment of a group of hedge funds and banks, a kind of a wolf pack, to attack sovereign debt in a series of countries. We should remember, on February 8th, there was this infamous planning session of a group of hedge funds at the offices of Moness, Crispy, and Hart in New York City, where they said, first we're going to attack Greece. That will allow us to attack the euro. Then we have the so-called PIGS group, Portugal, Ireland, Italy, Greece, Spain. But then they said every other kind of government debt, sovereign debt, be it nations, states, provinces, cities, or regional authorities, all of them would come under speculative attack. And that was the point made in particular by a guy called Donald Morgan of Brigade Capital. These are largely the people who helped bring down Lehman Brothers, Bear Stearns. They're kind of the wolves that gather when there's a wounded bank. Now, they use derivatives to do these attacks. They use credit default swaps. And yesterday at these Goldman Sachs hearings, that was what it was all about. When Goldman shorted Abacus CDO, they used credit default swaps to do it. So now we've got credit default swaps being used against Greece, Portugal, Spain, Italy. The British are very vulnerable. But now you can also get credit default swaps for American states, and this is something new. I was just about to ask you about
here in the United States, how are things going to be affected here? You know, so many states are already looking for money because they have budget deficits. Right. Are those debt obligations going to turn into meaningless paper like it did in Greece?
Let's just say, first of all, the states are a whole lot more solid than the hedge funds and banks, which are zombie banks that are doing the attack. But now you can get credit default swaps, allow you to place bets, because that's all it is, wagers, gambling. You can bet against California, against Illinois, Michigan, New York City, New York State, New Jersey, Florida, Massachusetts, Texas, Ohio. You can bet against the New York, New Jersey Port Authority. You can bet against municipal bonds that used to be considered
And is that already happening, or is that something that could happen?
It's already happening. Let me just point out, these credit default swaps are actually illegal because they represent issuing insurance when you're not an insurance company, you don't have the capital, you didn't register, and so forth. There's also a question about whether they're illegal under gambling laws. But the way you can use a credit default swap is you can create a stampede with a very small amount of money, because these are thinly traded, the markets are not liquid. You can create a great deal of panic with a very small push, and you can then bring down these the bonds of a city or a state that you've shorted. Now, there's a question of double dealing. We saw that Goldman was selling products to their customers, which they treated as suckers, and at the same time they were shorting them using credit default swaps. Now, is that going on with the bonds, let's say, of a state like California? And there's some evidence that it is. The double dealing by banks, the treasurer of California is now trying to investigate whether J.P. Morgan Chase, Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, Citigroup, and Barclays Bank are double dealing, securities fraud, in other words. This would be you're marketing the bonds of California, selling them, underwriting them, and at the same time, you're telling the people who buy them, these are not reliable, get yourself some protection, buy credit default swaps from us. So you're playing both sides of the transaction, just like the case of the fraud that has been brought up now in the case of Goldman.
And will the United States turn into the next Greece? I mean, is something like that going to happen right here? What are the consequences going to be? What is it going to look like really quickly?
The alternative is this. Either the United States and other nations will defend themselves against these predatory hedge funds and zombie banks, by essentially putting some of them in jail, because some of these people, like the ratings agencies, right, Fitch, Standard & Poor's, and so forth, their corruption has been highlighted by a hearing under Senator Levin in the U.S. Congress. either they get shut down or wolf packs of banks and hedge funds will attempt to attack and destroy the debt of sovereign states, and that will more or less bring the system of modern states to an end, and civilization with it, I'm afraid.
The
and that's
collapse
the depression.
of society. Well, Webster Tarpley, thank you so much for your analysis.